What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by rapper Chief Keef. Basically, this project is called Finally Rich, and it came out in the late fall of 2012. So the thing about this particular project is just the fact that Chief Keef had a hit, successful mixtape career in like the late Chief Keef had a hit mixtape career between the late 2000s and early 2010s. He had dropped a number of hit mixtapes, one of which was Back from the Dead, which I reviewed in the summer of 2023, and then there's some other ones on there like Bang, which came out in late 2011, some of those type pitches. So the mixtape fair was definitely pretty large in like the early 2010s as far as that particular kind of went. Chief Keef was one of the more notable ones that contributed to that particular movement in like the early 2010s. He definitely had some hits, one of which was the song I Don't Like, and another of which was 300. Some of those type ones. I want to say that 300 was on like his 2011 mixtape because I don't remember 300 being on Back from the Dead. And I don't know if it was on his later 2012 projects, but it said that that particular song came out in 2011. So I'm assuming it was on Bang from late 2011. It's kind of the pitch about it, but that's it. It's a pretty quality project here. Definitely has that taste of mixtape Chief Keef as far as our particular kind of goes. Has some beats by his longtime producer Young Chop, which are on here, which are pretty good. Those are some of the best moments on here, I'd have to say. The concept about it, the same thing that happened with Future when he translated the albums in 2012 with his album Pluto and Pluto 3D, some of those type pitches. Just kind of the concept that some of this commercial, more album realized Chief Keef is just different from his mixtape type format. Now, Chief Keef doesn't sell out on this particular product, but there are a couple of duds on here that just have the concept of trying some of that commercial type of appeal that just really feels like I feel like some of these type ones are just the auto tune type ones that are standard complaints about trap music. They're just like droning kind of auto tunes. Not like these are bad, but it's just kind of the concept. They just feel stock and routine out of that particular format compared to some of these ones. I feel like some of the album's best moments, like Hate Being Sober, Love Sosa, I Don't Like, some of those type ones, 300. A lot of those, the mixtape Chief Keef is definitely pretty fiery and pitches like that. It's just kind of the concept that, same thing that happened with Futures, just kind of that some of this commercial type fanfare as far as distributing it to like younger audiences and just pitches like that to where places like MTV, VH1, BET, some of those type folks would pick it up and just kind of translate from getting like an R-rated Chief Keef to possibly like a PG-13 Chief Keef, which is kind of somewhat noticeable on this particular product. Not wholesomely noticeable. He doesn't like this is not like the Natch the album to say it's not like some degree of like a very effective project, but in terms of it being like a full blown classic, it's not quite that. And the deluxe edition, which is the album I'm reviewing, there's 16 songs. If you count the 16th song that was an iTunes exclusive back in the day, I'd have to say that's kind of the concept about just being able to say there's 16 songs on there. And Spotify has that particular edition, so I'm reviewing the 16 song edition. There are some Best Buy songs that I'm not going to get to, but just the concept, I would have to say it's a good concept kind of get to some of these. There is also like a final edition or like a complete edition. Apparently there was like another EP or something like that that came out with an additional 6 songs. I might review that down the road as far as that particular pitch kind of happens. There's like some sort of expansion pack that came out with this particular album I'm going to have to get to, but basically I'm reviewing the 16 song edition. But this was a pretty widespread album. Chief Keef, like I was saying, was a big deal in 2012, late 2011, some of those type pitches. This album had 6 singles on it and a bunch of music videos, some of that type fare. So it was definitely a good. I feel like apart from Drake, Kendrick Lamar, Meek Mill, and Future, some of those type folks, I definitely feel like Chief Keef was one of the bigger deals of like late 2012, early 2013 as far as that pitch can happen. Now, apparently, I didn't realize this or back in the day, but apparently Chief Keef got blackballed from like the industry, and that's why it took him like 3 years to put out his second album. I kind of wondered where he went back in the day. I remember this particular album, but then he just kind of vanished and wasn't really around in 2013, 2014. He went back to putting out mixtapes and some of that type fare, but he didn't really have much other charting hits. He just kind of vanished. I guess he got blackballed from the industry because he had some bad relationships with folks in on like the inside as far as that pitch kind of went. But it's kind of concept. This is a pretty quality album. It's the same thing with Future, where it's definitely an excellent album and it's an arguable classic just in terms of the impact and what it did. I definitely feel like the impact and just the way that this kind of was a tumultuous, definitely one of the bigger deal albums of like 2012 and the early 2010s. I'd have to say it's just kind of concept that some of this commercial type fare just kind of downplays it a bit, but not wholesomely. So yeah, there were 6 singles on this album. The first one was 300, and this is a pretty nice one. This is like a jazzy kind of mixtape flash of a song that had to say in particular. It's definitely a pretty good buzz single, and it's a kickoff heat of a song that had to say in particular. Some great concepts for that. This like a good mixtape breakthrough for an album, I'd have to say. And by that, I mean, this is a good mixtape breakthrough song for an album, I'd have to say. So this is a good pick to kind of throw. Apparently, Finally Rich was supposed to be a mixtape first, but then it became an album. This is definitely a good song to kind of choose for like something that was going to be on a mixtape that wound up on an album. It's kind of the concept, just paying attention. Usually the biggest songs that wind up on a mixtape wind up on the album that comes out later on with artists, but this is just a good concept that Chief Keef picked some of his biggest hits because he did that a lot. Chief Keef had a lot of hits. When I reviewed Back from the Dead last year, that had some pretty good hits on there. Just being able to say that that felt album quality, just the impact of it. And that's kind of the thing with folks like Gucci Mane and Waka Flocka, Slim Dunk, some of those type folks. They did have some album quality type stuff, and there were definitely some mixtape gems from like the early 2010s that did that. 300 is an example of that. I Don't Like is an example of that, and there might be like one or two other songs on here, but there's definitely some good moments for that. I Don't Like is the second single. Now, this is a single I talked about last year when I reviewed Back from the Dead. That was on that particular mixtape. You can definitely find it in that format, but it's a little bit more remastered in album format on this particular album, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept. Basically, it's like a vintage kind of mixtape drill fury from Chief Keef, I'd have to say in particular. This is definitely one of 2012's bigger songs, I'd have to say, and this is like a pretty good vanilla club rocker, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept kind of get this one. Definitely a pretty good drill type tune. The thing about this particular album is just the fact that there's not a wholesome amount of drill. There's like some of it on here, but I do kind of feel like some of these bravado type artists like Rick Ross, Meek Mill, Chief Keef, Waka Flocka, some of those type folks, they really kind of downplayed drill more often in the second half of 2012. So it's this kind of concept that initially it was going to blow up like in mid 2011, late 2011, but that factor kind of particularly changed throughout the second half of 2012. And some of those moments just kind of started to cool off, and some of that craze just kind of happened. I do feel like at least I Don't Life was a huge song throughout the summer and spring of 2012. I'd have to say in particular, it's this kind of concept that there's not really like a follow up type song. I feel like Love Sosa is kind of close to that, but it doesn't have like the bravado and kind of stomp around type energy of I Don't Like or 300, I'd have to say. But it is some good stuff. Love Sosa is the third single. Apparently, this song went 5 times platinum in terms of single sales, I'd have to say, which is a pretty good pitch. It's an interesting concept. This is one of Chief Keef's highest charting songs, I'd have to say. This is a real nice one. It's like a brooding, kind of demonic goth rap hit, I'd have to say. Pretty good concept for that. It's like this is a good in the trenches kind of night traverse hit, I would definitely have to suppose. And this is just this doom beat rocks pretty well, I'd have to say. So it's just a concept. It's really gothic rap here, I'd have to say. Real excellent type concept kind of get. I do like some of that haunting type Chief Keef. It's not on full display on this particular album. I'd say there's at least one other song. I feel like Understand Me is kind of within that relative gothicness of that in particular, but it's just not really shown on full display. It's just kind of something that was kind of underdeveloped on this particular album. Not to say that Chief Keef is underdeveloped like he couldn't do it, but it's just kind of concept. It's just not really shown to the extent that it needed to. It's another strength of his that just was not really seen as much, but it's a good concept. Love Sosa's pretty good quality hit here. Definitely a nice one. Wasn't just a mixtape hit either. This felt like an album quality hit, I'd have to say. Pretty much one of his highest charting songs. Hate Being Sober with 50 Cent. Wiz Khalifa is a real nice one. This is a song I remember from Chief Keef back in the day. I'd have to say this is like a jittery kind of outing flair of a song. I'd have to say in particular this song. The song has a catchy chorus, and this is just a getting to it kind of night pizzazz of a song. I'd have to say in particular, this is definitely one that has like a commercial kind of mixtape feel about it. This one kind of feels like a mixtape song, but it's just a more commercial, realized type version of that, I'd have to suppose. There's some excellent type concepts to get here. I feel like 50 Cent works on this particular song. It's a recent hit for 50 Cent, especially considering the fact that not a ton of folks fucked with 50 Cent wholesomely past like the early 2010s, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept to see him circa early 2013. Wiz Khalifa kind of in his prime years doing some of that type of stuff. So it's a good concept to kind of get that one. I really like the chorus on this particular song. I really like the particular chorus on this particular song. I don't know if I said that. I kind of said that pretty quickly, but I like the chorus on this particular song. I definitely would say it's got a great hook on here, great song topics and pitches like that. Just excellent type concept of getting some of this. This would have to say it's relatively nice one just to be able to have some of this mixtape fury because Chief Keef was like 16, 17, something like that around this particular time when this album came out. So it's a good concept to get some of these spoilers and just be able to do it. It's a good concept. Another mixtape quality type hit on here would be the fifth single, Laughing to the Bank. This is a real nice one. This is like a rave kind of drill rap snarl of a song, I'd have to say in particular. This is like a good Kickstarter for turn up craze, I would definitely have to feel like, and this is just some stellar kind of venue heat. Now, the thing about it is, I feel like the strip club and this overall like bar type songs may not be as full blown, but I do feel like some of this outing type of jazz works pretty damn well. It's definitely a good concept to get some of this type of stuff just because Chief Keef was such a young buck doing this sort of thing, I'd have to say. So it's a definite excellent concept to be able to get some of these and just be able to have that sort of pizzazz. Because this one feels like a mixtape type cut. This one's pretty similar to Love Sosa with that same relative kind of hauntiness, but also some of that kind of trap type appeal of more future-esque and like future-esque and Yo Gotti-esque type trap tunes like 300 and I Don't Like and Hate Being Sober, some of those type ones. So it's just a good concept. Get some of that, I'd have to say. Chief Keef really had some great singles, pretty widespread type appeal. I feel like this is definitely one of the breakout albums like the early 2010s, like I was saying before. This really had some excellent type concepts, and the songwriting was on here pretty good as well. It's just the concept that these are just breakout singles. A lot of these just had the appeal, and just being able to fuck with some of these and just get towards it. All of this is some pretty good outing pizzazz. So I definitely feel like the Soulja score is going to get a pretty high score. And then the sixth single is Hallelujah. I'd have to say it's like a basic vanilla trap gem, I'd have to say, with like a mixtape type feel. I'd have to say in particular, it's like a standard nightclub kind of money thrower. I'd have to suppose in particular, and this is just good for like a regular outing. So this one's pretty similar to 300. I'd have to say this is another kind of basic. This is definitely kind of another basic bop on here to kind of get. This has that relative appeal, just being a vanilla type song, but this works with that standard typical night type fare that really has that particular pizzazz that works extremely well. I'd have to say. So it's just a good concept, just some basic kind of chill in the booth, get some drinks in your system, some basic pizzazz and stuff like that. I'd have to say in particular, this really works for that sort of appeal. Just kind of a good concept for some of those type things. And this is basically another highlight to kind of get off this particular product. So yeah, all 6 singles are recommendable. I'd have to say pretty much the biggest ones. You know, obviously 300 I Don't Like were some mixtape heat and fire as far as that particular kind of goes. Then Hate Being Sober and Love Sosa are some good album quality hits that just back Chief Keef as far as him being able to translate to albums and stuff like that. And then Laughing to the Bank and Hallelujah are some extra kind of more outing type fare and just trap cuts that work in like a good nightclub and venue kind of sense, I'd say. So some good concepts. But yeah, so there's 16 songs in this particular album, counting the iTunes edition, which is also on Spotify, I'd have to say. So out of those 16, I wound up recommending to 10 and a half. There's one almost song on here. And out of the standard edition that just only has 12 songs, I wound up recommending to 9. So it's pretty much the pitch behind it. It's just some concepts. So it'd probably just be easier just to not recommend the 3 songs out of 12 I don't recommend, which would just be No Tomorrow, Ballin', and Finally Rich, the title track. Those are the only 3 songs I don't recommend in some fashion on the standard edition. And then the extra songs that I don't recommend on the deluxe edition, the 3 extra songs besides that would be Sit Go, and then the extra songs on the deluxe edition that I don't recommend would be Sit Go and then Don't Make No Sense. I just would have to say we'll go ahead and talk about the songs I recommend first, and we'll get to some of these moments that are more kind of in the poorer sense, I'd say. So basically, Diamonds is a real nice one. Diamonds is another quality, glitzy kind of young chop beat. I'd have to say in particular, this is like some quick times. So this is definitely some quick times of a song I'd have to say in particular. And this is like a livening. The song's like a lively kind of evening turn up of a song I'd have to say in particular. This song has some mixtape feel, but it's a commercial hit, I'd have to say. So it's a pretty dope concept. Get this one. Just an excellent type flair and pizzazz. This feels like a French Montana song as well. He is on the song, but this feels like something he would have done like his album days of like, you know, like the Excuse My French days and mixtape type fare as far as that particular kind of one. Just a real glitzy type one that just works pretty quick times. I'd say it's a good pairing to kind of go along with Hate Being Sober and some of those type ones. This really has that appeal. This is probably one of the more glitzy songs on here. This is definitely a money counting type song, pitches like that. Just really kind of getting towards there's not really like a full blown carnivorous type one. That's one thing I did notice is just the fact in terms of that sheer carnage, like another song like I Don't Like, you don't get one that's quite as crazy as that particular one that's just demonic and just, you know, turn couches upside down, that sort of craziness. But I do look after it. I do at least feel like there is some energetic type ones. I do feel like Chief Keef has a certain pitch of energy on songs like Hate Being Sober. It's the same thing with Love Sosa, and I Don't Like is definitely a good one for that. Diamonds is pretty glitzy and just has a good, compelling energy about it. And then Kobe's a pretty appealing one as well. But it's this kind of concept in terms of that drill that just had the ferociousness that he had in early 2012. There's not really a bunch of these on here. But Diamonds is a nice one. Understand Me is a pretty highlighted one as well. This is like a glaring kind of night traverse gem, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a good snackage and pick up supplies kind of hit, I'd have to say. Just some after hours type flair, I'd have to say in particular. And this is just some residential thoughts, I'd have to say. So definitely just the concept of this night traverse, just smoking one on the walk home, picking up some Taco Bell, some gas station food, some pitches like that, I'd have to say in particular. It's just some good stuff to kind of have for some of that. It's a real nice murky type one for residential and night traverse type fare, I'd say. Some good demon time type music. Kobe's a pretty nice one for that as well. It's definitely another nice one. This is like a murky kind of mixtape slime of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's a good creeping kind of young chop beat, I'd have to say. Pretty good concept for that. And it's like a smoke a few cut, I would definitely have to suppose. Definitely want to get stoned to, something like that. This is just good for some night owl activity and commute, I'd have to say. Good concept. Pairs pretty well with Understand Me. Pairs pretty well with like 300, some of those type ones. Just would have to say some of those type ones. I'd probably say Gotham Bands is another good one for that sort of pitch. I mean, there's not as many kind of residential type fare. I feel like there's more nightclub bounce on here more so than residential type fare, but it does have some of those in between type moments to kind of get within that relative sense. Just a few of those on here. I feel like the mixtapes kind of have more of those moments, but it's this kind of concept. This is pretty good appeal. It's just an after effect of a concept. But Kobe's on the deluxe edition, so I would definitely recommend getting the deluxe edition. Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing about the deluxe edition is the fact that I only recommend at least the deluxe edition that doesn't, I mean, the iTunes bonus track is really not worth it. So getting the iTunes deluxe is really not worth it for that 16th song. But out of the 3 additional songs, Sit Go, Kobe, and Gotham Bands, I recommend at least 2 of those, which the only one I really don't recommend full blown would be Sit Go. So I'd probably have to say that at least in some fashion, it's kind of a draw situation where it's not a hit or a miss in terms of like it's a relative hit to be able to say that getting the deluxe edition is somewhat worth it, but it mildly expands upon it. I feel like at least Kobe's a full blown hit. Gotham Bands is kind of here and there. I'll go ahead and talk about Gotham Bands. That's the almost song. So this is like a mini kind of strip club night out, mini strip club night outing bustle of a song. I'd say in particular good concept for that. It's like a pseudo kind of future like trap cut for some social. It's like a pseudo kind of future like trap cut for some social times. I'd say, but this is kind of a dicey production. It's kind of one that just kind of feels like a super auto tune type trap type one to kind of get. I mean, I like the appeal of this particular one. This feels like a leftover or kind of half baked future cut. I'd have to say in particular. It's just kind of the concept of some of that relative appeal, but it's just kind of the concept. It just doesn't have the execution quite as overall capped off. This kind of like complete like this finesse about it compared to some of these other ones. Like I feel like compared to songs like 300, Love Sosa, some of those type ones, Hate Being Sober, it just feels a little bit kind of like it's not as tightly laced, I'd have to say in particular. It just feels like an after effect kind of one, but it's a relatively nice song. If you're just looking for standard trap, you just need like another boiler for like some night venues and night affairs and house parties and pitches like that. It is a nice one, but it just kind of stands out in like the sense of saying that this is not like one of the best songs on the album. I'd have to say if you've got buddies that notice like, hey, this is not quite as catchy or the chorus is not quite as infectious. This is kind of one where it's more of white noise type music more so than full blown, kind of like one of the best songs on there, I'd say. But it works for what it is. It has the appeal of being some night possessed, but it's just not the best song on this kind of thing. But so a pretty commercialized type song on here would be KK. I'd have to say in particular, it's definitely one of those ones that happens similar to like Future's Pluto album. I'd have to say in particular, it's definitely like a hop to it kind of Hustler's makeshift tune. I'd have to say in particular, some good concepts for that. It's like a standard dredge and like a trap type sound. I'd have to say in particular is the concept of just looking for some work shift type stuff or just got done with class or work, some of those type things. Just within a relative trap music, just the concept of some Hustler's makeshift. This is definitely like some get errands done and clean up type song, I'd have to say in particular. It's a good concept, get some bills paid, some of those type moments, just get the last tasks wrapped up and some of those type pitches kind of get in particular as far as I would kind of go. It's like the overall essence of some of these type ones. I mean, I feel like this is kind of necessary, but it's just kind of a low key type one. It's just a little bit more of like a spiffy and jubilant type one, I'd have to say. I do like some of the energy behind it, but it sticks out compared to hearing a song like I Don't Like or Hate Being Sober or some of those type ones or 300, some of those type ones that switch to like that kind of optimistic kind of motivational type pep of KK. It's just a different kind of mindset that goes along with it. But I do like the appeal of it. I feel like there are moments needed for that sort of pitch. I'd say it's this kind of concept, but it's a flip mode type song just within that aspect. But it works, but it's this kind of concept. It's a little bit commercialized, I'd say. But I do recommend that song full blown. It's not an almost song, so I do recommend it. So that's this kind of concept. So I'm going to talk about these 5 songs or 4.5 songs I didn't recommend on here. Basically, some of these type ones, like No Tomorrow is just kind of a poor Mike Will Made It type beat. This one was a really commercialized type one. I like the fact that Mike Will Made It was pretty commercial in 2012. He was definitely one of the bigger producers, but it was just one that didn't necessarily feel like a sellout type song. It was just more commercial and watered down than what it probably needed to be, I'd have to say, which was just not one that had as much appeal, especially for someone like Chief Keef. It just felt like that happened too suddenly just to be able to say for that commercial kind of breakthrough. Not the sort of song I would want to have super commonly more just within that aspect. It's the same thing with Finally Rich. That's another one that just kind of had some of that commercial breakthrough that just was not the real kind of heater for him. I just feel like they expanded upon side. I think he probably should have went with more horrorcore type songs. I mean, I think he probably needed commercial type songs in terms of being able to sell copies of the album and stuff like that, but probably needed something that could have been met halfway, like Tupac's Ambitions as a writer, or one of those type songs, or Rick Ross's Hustlin', something like that. I mean, Chief Keef really had no problems getting singles on this particular album, so it just felt like he didn't really need songs like Finally Rich, the title track, and No Tomorrow and some of those type ones. And Ballin's another example of that. That was another commercialized type one that just felt watered down and just was not quite as hitting as far as that particular kind of went. It was just kind of a clumsy type one. Same thing with Sit Go. That was just one that didn't really add up to much, I'd have to say in particular. Just really, it's a real kind of soft core type one that just didn't really have much appeal. And then Don't Make No Sense was just kind of a clumsy type one. I'd have to say is this kind of, it's too bad because I had a Master P feature on there and a cat named Fat Terrell. I'd have to say it would have probably been a better concept of that production type. It would probably been more edgy as far as that particular pitch kind of went. Just didn't really, that one just kind of felt tacked on. Just didn't really like the concept of how that one. I think Don't Make No Sense just probably needed better delivery as far as that particular kind of went. At least the makeup of that one, I just would have to say. But that's kind of the thing. So in terms of what I'm going to score this album, me basically recommending 9 songs out of 12 on this particular standard album. I'm going to give the standard edition of this album like an 8.75 out of 10. Pretty damn good to kind of get that in particular. Just basically a song shy of getting like a 9.25, something like that, just within the concept of really getting a higher score. I mean, this is an arguable classic. I definitely would say 6 singles, definitely one of the bigger rap albums of like the early 2010s. I'd say this was a big deal. The mixtape run that Chief Keef had was definitely pretty excellent. Pitches like that, he was getting tons of mixtape hits and some of that noise and just the overall street appeal and casual appeal. I'd say for some nightclub bounce, that I suppose a good concept for that. Just kind of the fact that those 3 songs just kind of gnashed a bit. Some of those commercial breakout type moments just didn't work for him. Just the appeal behind it, he just didn't really have the glitz of being able to throw those together like other folks, like just some like just more commercial type folks that were doing it around that time, like Kanye or Drake or some of those type folks. I mean, even Future had relative problems with doing that in some cases. I'd have to say is this kind of thing. But the deluxe edition of this album that adds the 4 songs to it, I'm going to go ahead and give that particular version of the album me recommending 11 songs or 10 and a half songs out of 16. Me recommending 10 and a half songs out of 16. I'm going to give the deluxe edition of this album like a 7.5 out of 10. I'd have to say I would almost, I mean, originally when I almost only recommended 10 songs out of 16, which got them bands wound up being one that I halfway recommended later, but I'd have to say basically it was going to get a 7.25 out of 10. It's going to get a 7.5 out of 10 because I feel like 11 out of 16 is a little bit, that's still relatively within the fashion of just being about less than 3/4 of the particular album, I'd say. So it's a 7.5. That's still relatively good, but the standard edition is just better. If you do get the deluxe, it's kind of somewhat, it's here and there. It's worth it to get the song Kobe, definitely, and a little bit of Got Them Bands, but it's not as much of a full blown victory considering the concept behind it. I just feel like the execution of that probably could have been a little bit better, but 7.5 is still relatively solid, I'd say. So in terms of the future, like, so the social score, I'm going to give the social score of this particular album like a 9.25 out of 10. So I definitely feel like there's 6 singles on here which had some pretty glitzy type appeal. I'd say there's definitely some great concepts. I feel like a lot of these mixtape songs work extremely well. I'd have to say it's kind of the concept. The minor natches about this project is just the fact that the deluxe was not quite as sincere. The deluxe was not quite as severe as it probably needed to be to warrant like at least a couple of these songs not quite being as much heavy hitters. And I'd have to say it's this kind of concept that some of these commercial type moments kind of gnashed down the album a bit. I'd have to say it's just the concept. I mean, I understand that they were necessary just to have it appeal to audiences that were more commercialized around that time for like MTV, BET type audience, stuff like that. But it's just kind of concept that some of these just, you know, I mean, Chief Keef's best moments, at least on this particular album, are like the furious type drill type moments, which, despite that fact, it's just too bad there's not another moment like I Don't Like. That's still one of his most furious songs, but he didn't really replicate it, I'd say. But there are some other moments. There's definitely some heat on here. For the most part, this is pretty much a damn near classic of an album. I'd have to say, in particular, just the apex of what was kind of happening in the early 2010s, and not the, just a real pitch of what was happening in the early 2010s. I'd say some real mixtape and album heat. I'd have to say this is a great debut to kind of get on top of that. Just some good appeal. Chief Keef translates pretty well the album type flair. I know his next album was Bang 3, which came out in 2015 after those internal kind of beefs that he had with like labels and politics and that sort of stuff. But this would have to say there's some good appeal towards it. So definitely impactful and kind of trailblazing revolutionary in a relative sense, that I'd say. So some good concepts. But in terms of the future, like Chief Keef put out, I want to say Chief Keef put out an album in May of 2024, something like that. So it's been relatively recent that he's dropped something. We're definitely going to get to some more of these. I do want to review Bang 1 from 2011. I want to see what hits were on there and some of those type pitches. So I'm definitely going to get to some more mixtape Chief Keef. I kind of feel like these early days, it's too bad that he didn't put out an album in 2013, pitches like that. I do know he has some quality mixtapes with other charting hits. We'll have to get to some of those, but this is basically an arguable classic. And this is definitely an arguable classic out of the early 2010s that made a lot of waves on those particular scenes back in those days, as far as I would kind of go with it.